Good morning or good afternoon, as the case may be, and welcome to Distribution Strategy Group's Technology Leader Panel, How AI is Redefining Sales and Marketing. We're at a very interesting point now with AI, and we've done research into how distributors are starting to apply AI, what areas of their business, and not surprisingly, sales and marketing is really at the top of the list for where AI is being applied today. And so we're going to hear from distinguished panelists on where that application is and what it's going to look like over the next couple of years. I wanted to make sure we do a little business first, a little housekeeping. We've got two sponsors, more than two sponsors for the show, but I wanted to talk briefly about an offering from Distribution Strategy Group called Demand RX. And Demand RX is a proprietary application that estimates the account potential of customers and relevant prospects in total and by product category. Demand RX enables you to make strategic and tactical decisions about what you're going to sell and to whom you will sell it. Once you understand the potential in an account, your sales and marketing functions are much more efficient and effective because they can focus on the right products for customers and prospects. Demand RX provides you the ability to grow wallet share, define your ideal customer profile, use that ideal customer profile to get the right prospects from our database of 48 million companies, and measure market share. Now, Demand RX is integrated with leading CRM systems. Next piece I wanted to talk about is the Applied AI for Distributors Conference. Exciting developments are unfolding for the Applied AI for Distributors Conference happening June 4th through June 6th, making it an event you simply can't afford to miss. Explore the forefront of AI, tailored specifically for distributors as leading tech companies unveil their latest advancements. Learn how AI is reshaping operations, enhancing efficiency, and driving profitability. This is your opportunity to engage with industry pioneers, gain valuable knowledge, and discover how AI is helping distributors thrive in an increasingly competitive marketplace. To learn more, scan the QR code on your screen right now, or go to appliedaifordistributors.com. Again, that's appliedaifordistributors.com. And now I'd like to welcome our panelists who will be talking about applications of AI in sales and marketing. So we have Chris Bauserman, Chief Marketing Officer of Connexium, Sandeep Anand, Head of AI and Machine Learning for Infor, Jacoby Zakretsky, VP of Tech Strategy and Solutions at Luminous Labs, and Chris Van Ittersum, CEO from Supply Movers. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
It's great to have you here. We're going to get into a rich discussion. I think without going into too much detail, it would be helpful if each of you could talk about what your company is doing with AI. Let's start first, Chris Van Ittersum, with you, and then Jacoby, who's on mute, and then Sandeep, and then Chris Bauserman.
Thanks again for the introduction. So I head up Supply Mover. We are a CRM and e-commerce platform for the distribution industry. And over many years of doing this business, what we've noticed is that software is getting more and more specific over the years. And what we've really prided ourselves on here is getting really specific in terms of bringing those technologies to the forefront for distributors specifically. So working on AI has been a big part of that in the last several years, and we're really happy to be able to share some of those insights today.
Thanks, Chris. Hey, everyone. Jacoby Zakretsky. I lead our technology strategy and solutions functions at Luminous Labs. We're definitely exposed to AI being used in sales and marketing across our clients, and especially the digital commerce space, as we're really a systems integrator. much of which involves the software you see represented here from these guys. So our job is to help connect that all together for ultimately either a seamless external customer experience, or B, an internal business user experience, making their jobs easier. So really happy to be here.
Hello, my name is Sandeep Anand. I lead the AI/ML solutions team at Infor. And thank you for the opportunity to have such a great group of discussion topics, leaders, so that we can talk about how AI can be used in type of the goal of personalization, and also looking at it from a pragmatic perspective, right? Infor, as some of you will know, is one of the leading software providers of business applications. So ERP, CRMs, workforce management applications. We have a deep industry experience, as well as a focus towards very highly focused industry-specific applications. So when you think of the advantage of having that experience, is AI is a natural extension to it. So once you have access to all of this information, how do you use it to improve business productivity, sales and marketing penetration, as well as maybe a visibility to distribution challenges, leveraging data to make data-driven decision making. So I'm lucky to be part of Info, but also kind of cheating, because I get advantage of seeing all this data and being able to do things with it. So
Yes.
But yeah, Chris Bonderman, head up go-to-market for Connexium. So I live and breathe this topic every day, so excited to be here with everyone. And what Connexium does is we help manufacturers and distributors ship more perfect orders that are on time and full and at a lower cost to serve. And we do that using AI-powered SaaS platform that really takes, for most of you, the majority of your sales orders that come in as unstructured POs through email, the like, and turn those into fast, accurate digital orders. So AI is moving quickly, and we're excited to take advantage of it.
So we've got a really great complement of different backgrounds and technologies that you are all representing. I want to start off with a question on personalization strategies for enhanced customer experience. And I think this question will have different responses from you based on your technology. So let's start first with you, Chris. Where is personalization with AI right now? Maybe even if you want to define personalization for how you're going to answer it, where is it now? Where is it going over the next couple of years?
So, so personalization right now, when I think of personalization, I think of it, kind of two parts. One is figuring out what kind of message or offer will resonate with a particular individual or account. And then two, how do you scale that, right? So I think ultimately, the real promise of AI for me as a marketer is being able to do what's been talked about in this one-to-one or one-to-few account-based marketing, but do it at scale, right? As opposed to just doing it in broad segments. And you can think about it as, if there's a number of value props or things that we can help with, looking at using AI today to go through and search maybe 10Ks or websites or blogs at target accounts. Today I would probably have that draft, personalized responses versus actually send it programmatically. But certainly in the future, you could have a whole sales or BDR or marketing outreach cadence that could be personalized well beyond, hey, Chris, I saw you went to college at the University of Michigan. Aren't you happy about the national championship? But can actually get a little deeper, right? So I think that's where it's really exciting to go. And if you think about a distributor, right, that can mean a lot of things for you. Talk to distributors who are looking at things like, hey, we've got a strategy to take advantage of manufacturers who are nearshoring and setting up operations in Mexico. So and they're setting up warehouses down there. So how do you find accounts that you might sell into as new business who are doing that, right? By researching that. So I think that's a good example of where you can really use that personalization to help target your accounts and then deliver that right message, that right pitch, which makes all the difference in the world from another spam or another cold call into really having something of value.
Okay, so who are you going to call?
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to sell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's unique about what you can bring to their pain point, and have that be the lead with, right? And not have it be a generic, and it will help you increase profit.
Okay. One of you could have said Ghostbusters in response to my question, but okay. Other Chris Van Ittersum, from your CRM and e-commerce perspective, what are you seeing in terms of personalization to enhance the CX?
So there's a couple things that come to mind. The first thing is, in the olden days, we'd all make our manual outreach. So number one, I want to see personalized cadence around accounts based on the interactions that we're having with those accounts. So you mentioned it already, but who should you call? But it's also when should you call them? And it's really about prioritizing your day to maximize your ROI potential with those accounts that you can do business with, whether that's a current book of business or reactivating old accounts or being proactive on new leads. What should I be doing throughout each segment of my day is a big piece of that. And people don't think about that as part of the personalization effort. The other thing is the messaging. For current customers, if I call you and I'm looking to get an order, or I'm looking to push things forward, I hope I'm armed with some information around what you might be interested in talking about, right? If you're already doing business with me, then I should know exactly where you're at with the products and what you're most likely to want to talk about today, based on history. And those things are in a lot of systems that could be challenging because I'm digging through old invoices or I'm digging through information. So surfacing just better data to that sales experience is really important. And then finally, on the conversational front, when we're trying to do outreach via automated means, if we're doing SMS, if we're doing email, if we're doing those sort of interactions, let's make offers in those that are specific to each customer's needs based on their specific interests, right? So what are the things that they're most likely? So in the olden days, you would have put everything on promotion or put certain things on promotion and then just blanket advertise the whole customer segment with all the same promotions, kind of like the periodical you'd get from your local grocery store, right? But these days, what's more advanced, and you might have even seen this from your grocery stores, is they send you a mailer and it's got the coupons for things that you actually care about because you buy all those products. So if we can specialize those communications to the things that each of our customers is most likely to care about, that's where we're seeing a lot of really good connection.
So you're adding to the discussion who, what, when, and then also how, the medium. Was that part of what I heard in?
Yeah, the medium and then the messaging on it's really got to be contextual for each. You say personalized, it doesn't necessarily mean just give me the background info. The interesting thing is you have the data already, right? It's in your system. You know what you're selling, you know what you're moving, right, to each of those customer segments. And then even if you didn't, if it's a lead and you're trying to be proactive with that lead, then who else looks like this lead, right? We can surface data around lookalike audience and say, what are people that look like this customer most likely to buy or most likely to be interested in, make them offers that are more specific and would meet their interest profile better.
Terrific. Jacoby, Sandeep.
Yeah, for sure. Chris, you mentioned kind of a key phrase there is surfacing better data, which I think is a challenge for many. So I don't know that technology is necessarily holding a lot of people back at this point, but maybe business processes and data is. But to the original conversation with personalization, what's interesting at the e-commerce and digital level, so we help bring in offline and online order data, all those things into a centralized system. We have a large furniture or retailer and wholesaler that is sending out 900,000 emails a day. And that's phase one. That didn't come just by happenstance. These are very targeted, have good open rates, SMSs, et cetera, and have a B2B component. The thing about them is that they are throwing this into like a CDP, a customer data platform, to rationalize all the activity that customers having, and then sending very targeted messages to upsell, cross-sell, recommendations, things like that from a timing standpoint. But what's really wild in these scenarios is that not only has this moved from a rule-based system, if this, then kind of thing that a person did, we are seeing this transition into like AI is doing these rules on their own now, where it's almost like hands off the wheel and it's running its own. That being said, you do still need a human to kind of like pay attention to these things to make sure you're not sending something completely irrational and now annoying those users. So that's been really cool to see from an AI standpoint, is it's moved from a human clicking these workflow systems to now AI starting to build out these programs on their own with guardrails, humans watching it. Secondarily, the thing that I'll mention is not only are organizations starting to send direct stuff to customers, but in the B2B space, it seems like we're seeing more and more messages, emails, SMS sending to internal salespeople saying, hey, your customer's doing this. Knock on their door, call them up. We don't want to remove that human element, right? That becomes friction now when it comes to cannibalizing digital and non-digital. So we see a lot of organizations now treating internal team members as a customer base and serving this data that way, which is pretty cool. Helps with adoption.
So I want to follow up on that point, Jacoby. So you mentioned in the future, we're going to be able to say, I want to create a command, I want to create a campaign that has the following characteristics. And you were describing what you want to target and how you want to target, and the demographic, firmographic, and what kinds of offers they should get, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
What are we able to do today that looks sort of like that, where you're able to bring a level of automation that maybe we didn't have two years ago in creating those campaigns?
Yeah, great question. So, that workflow system and creating those campaigns will say, when they bought this, send an email 3 days later. Someone's deciding on 3 days. Someone's deciding on 4 days. What we're seeing more and more, this is now capable of doing, is say, let that system decide based upon previous history. It may be 3 days, it may be seasonal, it may be based upon the customer's behaviors. You and I open emails or text messages, and we see certain things and say, I'll get back to it later. Well, there's certain metrics out there that say certain emails get open better at certain times of a day. That also goes down to the individual level as well. So, Jonathan, to your question, anything that we can have a human do that seems to work, you can almost have the system start to generate that, either send them an email or text, send them at this time of day, start to do that on its own, as a variable. I don't know when you're going to send it. I just know you're going to make the best recommendation to send it at this time, right?
So okay, so is that automation today really about the when, or is it also about the what? I'm going to keep using these WH terms through the.
I like this. It's both. It's both. I think first is the what, making it relevant kind of thing, and then the when is it relevant to that person, and that depends on the audience. Internal sales folks, for example, may want something completely different on the when versus an external customer, right? You may want, if you're doing B2B on the distribution side and you have small contractors as your customer, maybe sending them something towards the evening is better because that's when they're doing their business management stuff, right? Versus on the job site, things like that. It's both. And I don't know that you can have it not be both, actually, with success. So.
Okay, and is this, for example, in a Marketo or a HubSpot or a Pardot, or where does this ability live right now? I know all the marketing automation folks are starting to move towards this, but today, what can we do, and who can do that?
This is the hard part. And so this is where you need to start consolidating all the activity of customer data into one central place at that CDP, the customer data platform. There's a lot of software that has pieces of that. But again, as an organization, you may have certain back-end business softwares that have things in different places. You're trying to bring that all together, which again requires integrity, requires connecting things together. It's a lot of standardization happening. But AI can do a pretty good job of stitching things together with what I'll call even mediocre data. And so I'm going to say the terminology CDP is something you'd be looking for. Building out these kind of data platforms and then taking action on it is when something like a Marketo and a HubSpot, et cetera, is going to take place. It's not just a one size fits all where one software is going to do all of it. That would be, maybe too much of a monolith sometimes. First is collecting that data. Second is taking action on it. Kind of two separate things in a lot of ways. Some platforms can do both, but you have to decide if that's the best for you or not.
Okay. So today it's across multiple systems.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sandeep?
Yeah, and I think just to add to that topic, right? So if you think of where Info comes in, right? We have solutions that help with distribution value chains, right? And so when we talk about personalization, I think of the three levels of personalization. So we have personalization, so each business can decide and define their own marketing strategy based on the history and based on the customers. Then there's the personalization from the perspective of your customer segment and what you want to drive and how soon you want to drive it. And so we've talked about those two, but also how do you want to model the people helping you with the selling, right? Or able to add to a customer's basket. So the third level of personalization, the who we can add to, would be the how are your sales reps communicating with the customers and allowing themselves to upsell, cross-sell, improve kind of that customer experience. So we also look at how do you profile them and provide them point-in-time, real-time recommendations to improve, suggest, based on their behavior and their peers. So that's the other thing I'll add to it. is that something you can also model because the data exists, right? If you have that business platform that's capturing all your transactions, you also be able to kind of mirror the aggressiveness or the comfort level of the salespeople helping you with your sales, right? Because part of the challenge we hear from a distributor's perspective is that there's a lot of new people coming in, how they're learning from existing experience, but also building their own experience. So I would like to add that too as well to the mix.
Beautiful. Chris, from an e-commerce standpoint, and we talked a little bit about CRM, how does any of this personalization play out differently in an e-commerce setting?
I think it's very similar, and I want to jump on something Jacoby said earlier, in regard to how we tell our sales reps, and how we tell our customers about situations that we want them to know about are very similar. But with our customers, because they're not sitting in our system all day, we have more of a limitation. So we're outreaching over email, we're outreaching over SMS and other mechanisms, with phone calls, things like that. With our internal sales team, we want to be focused on trying to give them an efficient way of digesting that information without flooding, like, for example, their email box, right? Like, actually, companies have hired us to just come in and say, I had one company actually 4 or 5 years ago that came to us and said, hey, we're getting something like between 1 and 2 million email a month floating around between all of our different teams internally. And we just have these completely inefficient processes, but everyone needs to be on this email chain so they can see what's going on when they need to take action, whenever that happens to be their turn on the chain, right? And so they have to read every message to see if it's their turn or not, you know? And even if it was just a fire hose of information, we've got to be careful that we take into consideration how the team digests that information so that we're giving them the most proactive, we call it behavioral direction, right? We want them to do the next, whatever they should do right now is the next best thing that they should be looking at, right? So we try to surface those things in such a way where the sales team is being as proactive as possible. That goes for other groups within the company, not just sales, but what are they doing all day? And we're driving those behaviors to the most kind of efficient outcome. From an e-commerce perspective, to get back to your question, we want to do the same thing for the customer. So what we're trying to do is guide behavior. So think about, I use the analogy of the grocery store all the time because everyone can relate to it for the most part. Imagine that you walked into the grocery store and they gave you a set of shelves, which was exactly the stuff you cared about. That's kind of what we want to do for our e-commerce systems. It's things like surfacing recent interactions that the customer cares about, and then surfacing products that they most likely would care about, and getting into that cross-sell, upsell. So, and we've all, most of us probably in the world now have experienced, online ordering or ordering through platforms like Instacart or Shipt or Amazon. And we actually appreciate it. We appreciate when we log into those systems that they remind us to order the things that we care about. Like, oh, I'm not going to forget to get the laundry soap this week because it knew that pattern that I purchased it at these certain intervals. And I'm not going to forget milk and bread and cookies and whatever I like, right? Because those are the things I buy all the time. So when the system is very aligned with the customer from a habit standpoint, from the customer's habit standpoint, that's how we find that the system is going to win, because it's automatically surfacing the things they care about. And that's where they want to spend their time. When we make them search for it, we make them look around for too long, that's when we lose their attention, and eventually they go off platform to a system that will have done that better.
Yeah, and one thing I'd love to add on top of that, on the internal team piece of it too, right? Because I think there's really two really important pieces of it. One is that action, right? So what can you take? So having AI be able to look at order history and pop up insights, and it could be things about specific cross-sell opportunities, or it could be things like, hey, it looks like your ship to on this is different than it usually is, right? What is that? Or hey, your lead time, on this order you placed is really, it's way shorter than our typical lead time, and do you want to split it or not, right? So being able to have those kinds of things too, that are that kind of before the order is placed, that their CSR can actually have specific actions on. The other big thing is talking about the flood of emails or other things, right? Is just freeing up time from mundane tasks, right? If you look at a typical CSR organization and distributor or account management team, they're probably spending half their time just doing pretty repetitive work, entering orders, sending out updates manually in terms of shipment delivery updates, et cetera. So, it's very hard for them to think about building those relationships, getting deep on design wins and next big business, et cetera, if they're just trying to troubleshoot and process activity, right? So I think anything you can do also with AI to streamline the day-to-day frees up all those additional sales actions.
Let's one of the interesting things that I think is coming out here is cross-sell has been kind of the holy grail for distributors for a long time. Even small distributors literally have thousands of SKUs that the customer could be buying that they're not buying. It turns out, though, what I've seen from some of these systems is that reorder thing, Chris Van Nierden, that you were speaking about, where it's giving you a tickler to purchase, this or that item, or saying it's time to reorder that. That sometimes, particularly like in an MRO flow-oriented purchase, can deliver more value back to your organization, meaning you, the distributor, than just the straight cross-sell, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the other thing is, there's that analogy back to the grocery store. If you only need a couple of items, you may not rush out there right now to do that. But if it's top of mind and you're engaged into the reorder, it's now drawing you back into the order flow, to your point. And once you're in the order flow, it's then easy to then suggest things that you probably also want at that same time. So reorder is the obvious catalyst for an order. And it's the obvious catalyst for the order having more lines on it, right? But it's not the only reason that the order happens. It just happens to be one of the predominant things that most people care the most about. And so we use that as a tool to then encourage their behavior. And every time they're interacting to whether it be add another item to the cart or go through another suggestion, we now have another opportunity to suggest more. And that's where you're getting that cross-sell. The cross-sell is fantastic, but the problem is getting the real estate in the customer's mind for them to even giving you the chance to talk about it, right? So certainly through like an e-commerce site, you can't just go through a whole list of cross-sell items because it's not super relevant to them. So you have to find careful times to suggest that, but through the reorder process is a perfect time to do it. Hey, do you still need your Tide soap or your milk and cookies? And oh, and by the way, we've got a sale on blah blah product. Those are hand selected, like you could call them like hand selected, but AI selected, right, based on factors, and then you surface those for that cross-sell resell opportunity. And if they don't like that, no big deal. Go back to reorder. Fall back to one of the natural pattern things. So you kind of pick and choose how you surface things that way.
One of the interesting things being mentioned here is that, the technology, the AI, the CDP types of things can be surfaced on an e-commerce website to cross-sell, upsell, those types of things. But Sandeep, you mentioned something that we see very often. A side benefit of doing this at like a digital level is that when inside sales, outside sales logs into the website itself and does impersonation, with new people coming aboard, Sandeep, to your other point, it is very hard for new sales folks to know your whole product depth and width, right? Hundreds of thousands of products, it can be darn near impossible, right? The veterans that have been around a while know like the back of their hand. Oh, you need this too. You should probably get this, etc. So for new folks, you're serving this data to them like, hey, they bought that. I don't know. I don't look at the catalog, but I love something to be served to me. Hey, when I see a customer buy this, they can also buy this. So it's a good learning management system mechanism actually to build this behaviors for the internal sales folks to be like, hey, we're exposing this to customers. There's no reason why we couldn't show you too as a salesperson. And then you start to build that knowledge about what you actually sell as a company and your value proposition, all these things. It's been a side benefit we've seen just by using the website as kind of a hub because the technology is available in there. So it's been pretty cool to see.
Yeah, and one of the things I'll just add to that is, so the concept of getting a new person being effective in your organization is important. The other thing we see is, we talk about reordering, but if you're coming into a website to look for something, it's not always intuitive because you have like 500,000, 600,000 products. So how are you smart in allowing the search with the least amount of mouse clicks, like A, X, Y, and it gives you the best answer? So being able to reduce the time it takes to find the item allows you to have that customer engagement and bring them in. So that's another low-hanging fruit of AI, which is the smart search, which allows you to not only pick based on the characters, but also what you want to sell them to bring them in, right? And so just adding that as well as a use case that we've seen a lot of value with.
So I should point out to our audience, please feel free to ask questions. We got a couple of great comments lined up from one of our frequent flyers in attending our shows. Eric says, cross-sell is so important. The growth secret sauce is figuring out how to build upon old habits. We need to serve up incremental things, right? And then the next comment that Eric makes is many customers only buy 2 or 3 product categories from a given distributor. We really want to teach them to buy from 5 or 6 or more categories. The category awareness, changing old purchasing behaviors, right? So an idea that we heard was, as much as we segment customers segment distributors. You're the distributor I get my abrasives from. You're the distributor I get my adhesives from. I get my safety over here. But what Eric's saying is when you can expand that set of categories, you get bigger orders, you get stickier relationships, you get lower customer churn. There's all kinds of good things that happen when you do that. So thank you for those great comments, Eric. I want to shift to really in terms of creating sales content. Where does AI play a role now in creating sales content? And that's a big, broad question in terms of what we consider sales content. Jacoby, you wanna lead us off?
Yeah, it's a great question. And as on the systems integrator side, we work with CMOs, sales officers, CIOs, et cetera. It just depends on who owns digital in an organization, which is a whole separate topic. But like the weird thing that I'm seeing and feeling is the whole generating content with Gen AI, et cetera. I'm starting to feel like sales and marketing is really one and the same. It's hard to tell a difference, honestly, at a certain point. So, and I don't know that it's like, which part of the funnel is it, or should sales create this versus marketing? And then is there a branding thing going on? So I think the generative AI type of stuff has lowered the barrier of entry so much to where people can do a lot of things now, right? It's not me versus you. It's we can both do it. And then it's to figure out how is it best done to make sure that our brand and our content is consistent with our value proposition versus people going off and being a cowboy, right? I think because of the capabilities of Gen AI to do lots of things, just because you can doesn't mean you should. You should probably have some governance, especially on the corporate branding and marketing level. But I think that's a good barometer to kind of hey, hold on, we need to be intentional about this. We love to be innovative. We can do these things. At the same time, we do need to be a little careful, right? About are we giving a value proposition at an individual level that is not true to who we are as a company? And I see that pretty consistently, Jonathan, about we got a Ferrari now. Let's not get crazy here in a lot of ways. But it certainly by nature seems like it saves, and it does save a ton of time. Then again, you want to be serving your own data, because if you're using public, LLMs and everyone else is too, are you really unique in a lot of ways, right? Just because you can use the tool best, you do need to have it be a supplement versus your muscle, is what I like to say, right?
Yeah, that's a good starting point. I want to jump on this topic real quick too, because all of us on this call and probably anyone listening to this has probably received, thousands of marketing emails or more. And you understand the patterns of those, right? And it used to be that just send any blanket offer and you might consider it. Now it's just, I'm not going to look at anything unless it's from a friend or colleague that I already know, right? And so unless they can break down the door, and then they start breaking that down the door by, hey, I went to U of M too, or, those kind of things. It's like, okay, I've heard that now only 300 times, but I've still heard it so much that I recognize it's just a kind of a corny offer. So the care and consideration that we have to have for generative AI is it will be, I don't want to say abused, but I think people have this mindset of, oh, I'm going to use that to make it look like I'm a person and so I can get them to respond. I'm ultimately going to try and get them to do an activity. So we still have to go back to what are the things that the customer cares about. And if we can just surface the things the customer cares about. So, for example, we could say, hey, it looks like you stopped buying such and such product from me. I just want to let you know we've got a promotion on that right now. And if you've transitioned to something else, let us know. We want to help. Be proactive with stuff that they might also recognize, but using the pattern recognition and things, and then a combination between that and generative AI for messaging, I think is really important. It curates the messaging that we can send out. In addition, there's this thing that you may not recognize as AI, but we've probably all seen it. You can even see it on sites like Expedia. If you're going to look for a hotel, it'll say people that have been to this hotel think this way about the hotel. So say, well, they really like the beds, but then they were complaining about the noise. They're summarizing all of the commentary of thousands of comments. That's a really super advantageous thing to do for our sales teams when I got to go into, potentially 100 or more accounts a day and make calls and make emails and make progress. When I open up that account profile and I can see a summary of what's going on within that account, and you've probably done this, like you can provide information even on a practice basis to a system like a ChatGPT and say, here's my sales data for this account, or here's my notes for this account. Give me a summary of what I should do next. So those are some fascinating use cases. And when we build that right into the software, the net effect is right within the CRM platform. I know we do this and some others do this as well. You can get a summary of what's going on with the account, what you should be talking to them about, an account review essentially. And anytime you call them, you don't need to spend 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes doing the research on each account. That's already pre-done for you. And that generative AI use case is, how do I translate the information and quickly give it to someone else so they can decipher it without having to do all the busy work? So that's another fascinating use case for it.
I think we talked a little bit about the personalization here, earlier, but I think if you just look at the content itself in terms of what you can create with that content, I think that two things really stand out to me that you can do today. Right? One is actually looking at a lot of customer data and actually extracting new topics for new content or new messaging or new offers, right? So one thing we've done, we did a 900 company benchmark survey with a whole bunch of questions that were quantitative but open but free form. So AI is great to go through 900 free-form answers and look for patterns. Hey, what do what problems you'd find to solve? Where do you need help? What do you wish a supplier was doing for you? You can find those things, and those are real. That pattern matching is some real gems. And you can even then, if you're really good at AI, right, can then say, hey, come up with some offers, come up with some promotions based on this, and what target, what segment can go after. The other thing it's really good at today is derivative content, which again, you can spend a lot of time making, a particular offer. I think the question is really about breaking into a new category, expanding categories. So maybe you come up with a great anchor message about why you're the best fit for a safety product or something else adjacent to a lot of customers. But then being able to take that one, human created, nugget of that, and then just have generative AI, come up all kinds of, really specific, infographics, quick videos, other targeted messages that go right, to your audience. And that's the kind of thing that, looks polished. It's more than just the email customization. Those things, you can do that today. Again, I think the future, I think is really interesting when you start looking at, and some platforms already have it today, like HubSpot or even Google Ads and things. You start thinking about tying into search traffic or other things, other topic or intent topics. Being able to kind of do a little Mad Libs on that today, it's kind of limited, but I think in the future, those kind of things can really create net new offers, net new landing pages, net new ads that you couldn't have dreamed up at scale.
Yeah, I want to focus this discussion just a little bit more. Great stuff. We have a great comment/question from Joe, one of our frequent listeners. He says, here's something that would help me put it into the real world. Can any of the panelists share some real world examples of a win with this technology where a distributor plugged in AI and it drove a result? We don't need names or examples. So the result could be, I got more efficient in a co-pilot setting. I got more wins. I'm more effective. What are the 3 or 4 things that are being done that are people are winning with today, either efficiency or effectiveness?
And so let me start with this, because this is, especially in distribution, I consider this as a low-hanging fruit. I know people may not think of AI that way, but especially because of the nature of the market, we have lots of products, we have customers as a competitive environment. We are seeing a lot of wins with pricing. So basically around margin rationalization, dynamic pricing. We're seeing lots of use cases where with AI around managing your goods and how you have placed them for optimal customer service levels in terms of shipping and providing them at the right time, the right place. So think of the concept of the right goods at the right time, the right place, and the right price is really where we are seeing a lot of examples. We're also seeing bread and butter use cases around just, as I mentioned, identifying products very quickly so that you can quickly get the customer to get to use them. And then, of course,
identifying what you mean.
What you need, yes. And especially when you have new products, right? So ultimately, you're stocking something, and then they want the same version, but you no longer have that in stock because it's outdated. What's the next replacement one, right? How do you find that quickly? So some very basic things that allow you to kind of improve the customer experience. And the last thing I'll pick will be, of course, the ability to the product recommendation, but also the basket recommendation, which is it looks like you're about to paint your room and you've forgotten the paintbrush, right? That ability to be able to identify what are you really buying, and then is this what's missing? So some kind of basket analysis. So I would say those are things that are low-hanging fruit that we see lots of customers getting quick value. Value in about 60 days in terms of how you set those up.
Yeah, it's a couple great examples come to mind for me. Is one is think about a large industrial distributor looking at using AI to automate their order processing, order fulfillment process, and talk a little bit about order error rates, right? So missing on time in full, missing perfect orders. So they actually cut the order error rate of errors that went into the field, right, reached a customer from 4% of orders down to 1%, which is a huge lift, right? You think about, most companies today, the majority of the orders are processed manually. Our benchmark studies showed about $18,000 total cost per order error when you include churn and reverse logistics and destroying inventory, et cetera. So you got a huge gain in efficiency there. Not to mention that probably the number one reason that most of you will lose a customer is if you're missing delivery dates, shipping the wrong orders, right, not being able to fill. So that can be a huge lift right there, and all that's by transforming those manual orders into digital. And what's interesting is it goes beyond just processing what the customer gives you, because one of the things interesting with AI now is you can look at that order and you can actually do things beyond just a clean order, right? It's one thing to have an order that comes in and everything's perfect, right? They use your part numbers, the right price, the right lead time, right units of measure, everything's clean coming through. But a lot of times they'll send you orders that are using their part numbers, not theirs, or hey, here's an order, here's a description. Can you find this for me? The pricing's off, and units of measure are off, right? They're ordering in pallets versus each, or whatever the case may be. And those sort of things you can actually use AI now to validate and then correct those orders before they're placed, right? So you actually can go beyond just processing them. And that can have a huge impact again on the speed of delivery, and hitting same-day shipping targets, as well as reducing those errors. And then you can go back and say, look, you keep sending me orders with due dates in the past, right? So you need to fix this, right? Because this is causing an issue. Second interesting use case around AI in the kind of order fulfillment digitizing space is that when you start using AI to look at with patterns as well as clean the data coming in, you start seeing really hidden operational impacts. We've got a major customer in the pharmaceutical and healthcare space, and they had an emerging market region that was saying, hey, we've got 100% fill rate, right? Everything's fine. But what they were doing is they were adjusting the order quantity based on what they could ship and deliver on hand to hit their targets, right? And so with putting manual processes in there, too much data for anyone to go back and check manually. So they're showing 100% fill rates, but then really when we put in AI on top of that, you're actually only filling 93% of what the customers ask for, right? So that 7% is leaving money on the table, and it's missing your opportunity to say, hey, do we need to increase our orders from our suppliers, redistribute how we put inventory in warehouses because we're actually not filling a lot of orders here. So that's another thing I think AI is really powerful on, is just sort of taking out a lot of that. I don't know if it's shenanigans or just shortcuts that the team may be taking, and it's impossible for you to kind of see at scale if you're trying to look at that manual.
So Chris, if I were to summarize, we get the benefit of increased accuracy. We can put a cost on each additional point, or a benefit on each additional point of accuracy.
Mhm.
We get the $8, $10, $12 of order entry cost per order. Take your number of orders, multiply by $8 to $12, right? We get delighted customers who get a immediate acknowledgement within several minutes as opposed to, and then we also get the order out sooner.
Right. Exactly. And and you're able to spot those opportunities, as I mentioned too, because once you actually take, some of the human processes and that dirty data out of the picture, right, then that allows you to really do the analytics on top of that to find patterns, where you can actually, really drive new business.
It's a good question, by the way, Joe, and I'm going to answer with something not very sexy at all, and it's very blocking and tackling here. Is no one's ever happy with their product data ever. There's a few outliers that are okay with it, but when it comes to product data using AI, even if you just have a spreadsheet of all of your attributes, uploading it into Gemini, Copilot, whatever, it's likely a lot of distributors are selling, products that others sell, not unique things, right? So these are things that are findable on the internet. If you have zero data in your attributes or your romance copy, trust me, you can use AI to fill something in. Why? Because it helps searchability on your website. It helps your team members understand products better, all the things that we just talked about. So, I live on the Mississippi River. And so you're talking about product data being at the top of where Lake Itasca is, feeding all these things downstream. It can really be useful to fill in product data so that it's better than nothing. You still need to validate it. I'm not saying throw it into production, but it's better than nothing. Trust me.
Well, I think on that point, Jacoby, what's beautiful is if you've got 100,000 SKUs, there's 10,000 SKUs that are driving 90% of your revenue. And if you got that data from AD or iMark or wherever, your data looks very similar. So you need to take that top 10% of the SKUs and do something that's going to differentiate it. Right?
Exactly. Expose your value proposition at that moment. That's it right there.
Yeah, beautiful. I want to shift to a kind of a last topic here, on which is really having to do with infrastructure. What is the infrastructure that people need to run AI?
Yeah, I want to jump on this one. This is an interesting one, and I'll just start it because each of us on this call has different specialties. And what was interesting even about the last question is depending on what frame of reference each customer has and where we've been at with our most recent customers when in our interactions, we answer all these questions a little differently. But it really comes down to a phase of kind of like a phase of life situation, or we call it the business maturity. Based on the question that I'm seeing here, it's where do I start? Do I need an ERP? Do I need a CRM? How do I even go about the strategy, right, for this? And so we've kind of mapped out a maturity matrix on this where companies typically start at some sort of an accounting system because they need to pay taxes and they need to collect money and that sort of stuff. And they quickly outgrow that as they're selling, into the millions of dollars. They go and they buy, typically they buy an ERP. And then the ERP is handling orders and it's handling all the things that it does really, really well in warehouse and management and operations. And then they start to run into marketing challenges and sales challenges. And that's where we start to see more of the advent of the CRM and the more advanced CRM and e-commerce platforms that are out. So it's really just answering this question is really interesting because each company and what they're trying to solve today can be solved in different ways depending on where they're at in their phase of life. And our specialty has been on the CRM and the e-commerce front as it relates to distribution for many years, and we play well with others, right, in the sandbox, right? There's a lot of solutions that are in the sandbox, but one of the questions that was asked about this specifically is how do you build out a roadmap or strategy, or where would you start, especially if you're maybe earlier on? And one of the things I want to answer on that, and we'll turn it over to you guys, is I think it's very important for you to have a set of processes, regardless of, system agnostic, right? You have to have a set of desired outcomes and processes that well, that your company, where, in other words, which products and services you offer that you're doing really well within the market, right? How you offer those. What are your procedures so that you can get people on your team to follow those procedures? And when you follow those procedures, that's when you're having wins, right? Once you have an understanding of the right way of doing things in terms of your business model, Now you want to take that and apply that into technology so that you can have the technology enforce those processes. That's really important. And that's one of the things that our system does and some of these other systems from these vendors here do, is they will take the things that you care about most and those outcomes, and then they surface those outcomes. So they surface the suggestion for those behaviors that are going to get those outcomes to your team. So like, for example, with our solution, you know, in terms of scaling sales, like I wouldn't advocate for you to bring on a ton of salespeople without having a great sales system for them to use, whatever it is, right? That they can, that you know that when you're putting someone in a chair and you're going to spend X amount of dollars on their salary and commissions and things like that, that you're going to get an ROI out of that because they're doing all the right things. And it can't just be tribal knowledge, right, running around, because you're not getting an efficacy out of that spend. So you've really got to have systems in place. And I'll just system agnostic. Those systems have to be terrific at what they do so that your people can quickly hit the ground running, you know, in the early days. And then as you get further and further into refining, you'll find other needs. And then you can have, in this day and age, a lot of other systems working together in kind of a concert to deliver on various outcomes. So it's really probably more about making a list of what are some of the key things that you want to see as your goals, you know, this year. And you then take those goals and you can even literally go on Google or ChatGPT or other and say, hey, these are the things I want to accomplish. What's the best way to accomplish that? And it'll give you actually like a list of systems or solutions that you can look into, which is fantastic.
Jacoby, I think you spoke about the CDP, right?
Yeah, I did. Yes.
Okay. So we have a question from our audience. This is related to the infrastructure. Is the customer data platform, is it part of the ERP? Is it part of the CRM? Is it another program? Does the AI reside in the CDP and the prompting of inside and outside sales pass through the EM or ERP or CRM? Maybe expand this into more broadly, what do we need in the way of data for AI? Because that's really what this gets at, right?
Great question. And I'm gonna avoid using the term "it depends" because a little bit does, but like, you know, when we talk, if you try hard enough, by the way, Excel can be an ERP, CRM. If you really try hard enough, it could be. All right. Not saying do that, but it can be. And so in this example, when we talk about infrastructure, actually my background is in the IT infrastructure space. So I get all nerdy about pipes and plumbing and routers, switches, things like that. But when it comes to this aspect, one of the key pieces is we do not want to be hammering a system of record production system like an ERP, for example, of pulling this data all real time. You want like a staging area for a lot of this data, if you will. Call it a data warehouse, call it a business intelligence system, whatever you want to call it. Just a data lake, so to speak, for all this data to reside, for other systems to ping off of and to get, versus Sandeep hitting Infor directly for these huge kinds of queries that may impact performance, scalability, et cetera. So you have purpose-built systems for various things. You want to use a system of record and create a system of reference like a CDP that you collect all this information into. There is a distinct difference between the CRM, a CDP, and an ERP. And it may sound duplicative, and it does on a Venn diagram. But as you start to scale to a certain point, that Venn diagram becomes more clear with their purposes, so to speak. One's more about relationships, and one's more about holistic interactions, for example. One's more about transactions. And so when we talk about infrastructure, it depends on kind of your IT strategy when it comes to using the cloud, a PaaS, a SaaS versus on-premise types of systems. I don't know that I would advocate any distributors to build their own AI kind of like data centers on their own at this juncture. I'd probably dabble in something that's already done this before with the infrastructure and then get a beta test of it to see if it's valuable for your business before deciding to buy 5 racks of equipment with a CapEx and say, hope it works out. Probably not a solid idea. But you do need to have a little bit of upfront investment to test these things out, if you will. Again, start small though. Have your spreadsheet, Excel, whatever, load it into ChatGPT, see if you can start generating some small business outcomes to kind of show some breadcrumbs about what it could be later. Start building that snowball, right? Because if no one's doing it, you're kind of stagnant, right? So at least show something to go off of. Trust me, it'll go pretty far. So Chris, to your other point, don't focus too much on the technology infrastructure. It's more about the people and process infrastructure to start that piece. 100,
absolutely.
Fantastic.
That's really critical.
We're going to need to wrap up here. Thank you all for a very, very stimulating discussion. I had just a couple of pieces I wanted to share. as we wrap up here. So next week, CRM. CRM is huge and it's growing. We see it as the next big wave, kind of like e-commerce. So we're going to be talking about CRM and sales analytics using data and technology to win. A week from today, it's a best practice study hosted by Brian Hopkins. I'll be on the show as well, sponsored by Proton.ai. On May 8th, Unlocking the Power of AI, more about AI, a case study with Millcraft. These guys are crushing it with AI. They're not a huge company. They're not Grainger. They're not Sonopar. They're, $200 to $500 million company, and they're really, really applying AI. It's going to be sponsored by Intershop, Profit Optics, and ORS Group. Thank you again to the panel for a terrific discussion, and we look forward to seeing you all on future episodes. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers, guys. Thanks. Bye.